Good morning, everyone in the VC and elsewhere in YouTube land. It's Matt, and I'm back with more album reviews. It's been a good long while since I made a video. Usually that's because I'm lazy or just not in the mood. But my new computer, which I've got about 14 months ago, broke. Had to get it fixed, and that took a lot longer than anticipated. So I couldn't have made videos these last couple of months or so, even if I had wanted to. But I'm back, and with that, we will continue with John Lennon, and we come to Walls and Bridges, which was released September 26, 1974 in America. A few days later, in early October in England, it came out. So if anyone who's not been watching these videos, I'm doing the Beatles solo albums in order of release. I've already done Paul and George and Ringo, so now I'm at John, and we're almost to the end of John's discography. But yeah, so this Walls and Bridges and cool packaging. It's got the movable album parts, so you can do different fun things with it. It's got the drawings that John made back when he was 11 on the cover. It's got the inner sleeve with a picture of John looking stoned or drunk or happy. It's hard to tell. There's another. It's on the Apple label. And what else comes in this thing? There's a book in here that has there's the back of the book, front of the book. Nice picture of John looking fairly happy. More drawings from young John, lyrics to songs, and that's the same picture. That thing got another. Yeah, there's a nice cover, nice packaging. Anyway, this was an interesting period in John's life. This was the time when he was separated from Yoko and shacking up with May Pang, living in Los Angeles instead of New York, having his wild weekend, trying to record the rock and roll album, which we'll get to after this one, which was an album of just old covers of old rock and roll songs that was fraught and anecdote filled, but we'll talk about that in the next review. Reconnected with his son Julian, which is a good thing, who he hadn't seen in 4 years at that part, which is not the best parenting skills on John's part, to ignore your son for 4 years, but is what it is. Hopefully at least called him on the phone sometimes or sent him a birthday card. But so a lot of stuff going on in John's life, and also he had, even though the album before this, Mind Games, the title track was a hit and got a lot of airplay, he had sort of wasn't having the hits and wasn't getting the good reviews that he had in his Beatle days and in his early solo days with Plastic Ono Band and Imagine. So he was probably bothered by that somewhat, I would imagine. Anyway, I bought this album when I was about 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there, around 77, 78. Didn't like it that much back then, with the exception of a couple of songs, 2 or 3 songs. In the years since, I've grown, my appreciation of it has grown somewhat. I always think of this and Mind Games as bookend albums, the same way that I think of Plastic Ono Band and Imagine as bookend albums. They're sort of complement each other to some degree, even though they're different albums in many ways as well. Anyway, on with the songs, I guess. We will start with the first song on side 1, which is Going Down on Love. It's a really good opener to the album. It's a bongo beat that gives way to sort of a bongo beat start to the song that sort of leads into this really taut, tight funk arrangement. It's got a really jittery, anxious feel to the song throughout. Some sexual innuendo. There's also a little bit of tinge of sadness to the song too, but it's a good song. It's a nice mid-pace rocker. Really like it. I'm going to give that song a 10. I think that's a great opener to the album. Now we come to one of the two singles from the album and the one that topped the charts, and John's only #1 song until Double Fantasy, only #1 song in his life as a solo artist. Whatever Gets You Through the Night, and that, of course, like I said, did go to #1. It's funny, I remember hearing that on the radio back when I was a kid, but rarely ever hear it on the radio in the years since the 70s, or I didn't anyway. Even on the Beatle channel, I haven't heard it that often played. It was #1, and that's good that John got the #1 that he probably wanted, because it'd been a while. I was never crazy about the song. To me, because this is a song that he did with Elton John, this sounds a lot more like an Elton John song than a John song, which is not a bad thing. Elton John has some really good songs, but I think it was maybe a case of John just so hungry for a hit that he, instead of doing his own thing, sort of tapped into the current musical trends of the time. And of course, Elton John in 1974 was about as huge as you could get. The fact that it sounds like an Elton John song would not necessarily be a bad thing, but it just doesn't sound like a very good Elton John song. It sounds, to me, sort of like, I don't know, a retread of something like Philadelphia Freedom, which that's a pretty good song. But Whatever Gets You Through the Night, it sounds, to me, it sounds a little bit too 70s, like the Saturday Night Live house band sound to it. And on top of that, it just, the production is sort of claustrophobic, and it just sounds too frenetic and too busy. There's some good lyrics, lyrical imagery, sword cut through flowers, and don't need a watch to waste your time. It's, I guess people like it. It's just one of his hits, obviously. To me, I'm going to give it a 7. I can listen to it. I don't, it's not a terrible song, but it's just one of his that never really did too much for me. And I guess a lot of people out there maybe like it more than I do. But Whatever Gets You Through the Night, it's good that he got his #1. It never did too much for me, so 7 I'm going to give it. Excuse me. Third song on side 1 is Old Dirt Road, which he wrote with, did Harry Nilsson write that, or did John write it with Harry? I think they wrote it together. Anyway, I love the line in there, shoveling smoke with a pitchfork in the wind. It's got a lot of good imagery in there. This is sort of a rock and roll, because John by this time would have been, 34, 35, in that age range. So this is sort of rock and roll from a more grown-up lens than a 20-year-old. It's sort of a trudging through life and making do and doing the best you can and trying to make the best of the situation type song. Again, a little bit of a tinge of sadness and regret and longing to the song, but it's a very good song, a pretty song, nice vocal imagery. I'm going to give that song a 7.8. Now we go to the fourth song on side 1, which is What You Got, which is just a out of the gate explosive funk rock. John sort of in his twist and shout voice. Maybe his best solo rock song. Maybe there's some other contenders, but it's up there. It's one of my favorite of his solo songs, and it's almost my favorite song on this album. I know What You Got, I don't know if he's singing about sorrow from being separated from Yoko, or what exactly he's singing about here, but it's just a good blow the roof off funky rocker of a song. I'm going to give What You Got a 10. I love that song. It's just, like I said, one of my favorite, almost my favorite on the album. Next is a song called Bless You, 5th song on side 1. I guess he's singing about the separation, the situation with Yoko. Oh no. It's a nice song. It's a little too dated and 70s for me, and I didn't really like that type of music even back then. little too misty, watercolored, soft rock, sort of that watery piano. Lyrically, it's a good song. It's a little too close to the things like Bread and Michael McDonald and Christopher Cross and that type of music for my liking, which is fine if that's the sort of thing you like. But some of that stuff, but most of it is just doesn't do it for me. So Bless You, I'm going to give, because it's got nice lyrics. I guess I'll give it a 5.6. So there we go with that. Number 6 is Scared, song about being afraid of growing old and being alone, which, I mean, at 35, I don't know. John, unfortunately, never got to the point where he was in his 50s or 60s. And, but being alone because didn't know what was going to happen with the Yoko situation at that point. Didn't know what was going to happen with May Pang, I guess. Lyrics of Scared are okay. The song overall is a little bit dull. I'm going to give it a 4 on Scared. It's kind of a weak link on the album. So then we go to side 2 of this album, and we open up with the second single released from the album, which only got to number 9, which is kind of funny given that the song is called Number 9 Dream. If it would have been up to me, that would have been the number 1 song instead of Whatever Gets You Through the Night, because it's a lot better, and it's in fact my favorite song on the album, and it's may probably very well be my favorite John Lennon solo song. So this is Psychedelic John is back, which is sort of a surprise because usually John in the Beatles and through his solo career, he would do something and you know, get everything he wanted to get out of it, and then he'd move on to something else, so that, you know, the Beatles were the beat group, and then the sort of folk rock Dylan inspired group, and the psychedelic stuff, and so forth and so on. And then you got Plastic Ono, the experimental stuff, Plastic Ono Band, Imagine, which even though they bookend are still pretty different. Then you got the radical politics of New York City. Then you've got sort of a return to music. And anyway, John kind of jumped around from one thing to the other, and he usually didn't go back and revisit what he'd done before. So here it's sort of a surprise that he's returning to sort of the psychedelic period. You could have I could have seen this on Magical Mystery Tour or one of the 67 singles, maybe even the White Album. So don't know whether he's singing about the Beatles here or about his youth or just dreams or whatever, but it's a beautiful song, and it's just a trance, dreamlike quality to it. Just a very affecting song. I give it a 10, and like I said, best John solo song in my opinion. Most probably it may be my favorite Beatles solo song overall, and it's certainly up there in the top 2 or 3, if not. So Number 9 Dream, just a wonderful piece of work, and that gets a 10 in my opinion. So but I just love the sound of it. That's got the kind of dreamy, uncertain sonic shifts here and there in the song that recall things like I Am the Walrus and Strawberry Fields. Can't say enough about it, but I guess I better stop saying stuff about it, otherwise we won't get to the rest of the songs on this album. So we go to the second song, Surprise Surprise, Sweet Bird of Paradox. This is sort of a horny, raunchy ode, I guess, to May Pang or to women in general, or to Yoko. Hard to imagine anyone getting horny over Yoko, but anyway. It's just a loose, sweaty, kind of has a Rolling Stones sound here and there. Pretty good song. I'm going to give it a 6.5. Steel and Glass is sort of a How Do You Sleep Revisited, only this time I think it's about Alan Klein, though I've heard that he later said that it was and wasn't, so I don't know. How Do You Sleep's a better song. Steel and Glass is okay, but it's pretty workmanlike, pretty mundane musically overall, and other than the fact that it's John in the you know, vicious bite back mode. It's not much to the song that's of interest. I'm going to give Steel and Glass a 3.5. So, Beef Jerky is number 4. That's another. There's a whole lot of soul and sort of funk influence all over this album, because I notice I'm saying funky a lot on these songs. But here we go again. Funky, sort of a give and take, to and throw, back and forth workout of a song. Instrumental. It's sort of reminds me of Soulfinger and so forth. Not as good as that, but it's a nice, fun little instrumental. Doesn't really add up to much, but it's a nice little blast of instrumental back and forth funk. So I give that a 4.5. And turn the page here, looking down at my notes. I actually listened to this album and wrote out the notes I had on it like 2 or 3 months ago, and then the computer broke, so these have been sitting here, and I had to go back and re-listen to the album and look through the notes and see if they made any sense that I wrote a couple of months ago. Yeah, all right. Number 5, is that right? 5. Nobody Loves You When You're Down and Out is gonna be just one of those where you can take a John song and apply it to anyone's life, because we've all had those. Most of us, I think, have all had those times in our life when just everything was going against us and didn't seem like we had anyone to turn to. Specifically, John's probably singing about depression over being separated from Yoko, and maybe his current standing in the music world, where he's always going to be famous for being a Beatle, but as far as his current stuff was not getting the critical and commercial attention that it had been getting in years past. So maybe there's a bit of that. Everybody loves you when you're 6 foot underground. This is not the cheeriest song, but it's a very good song, and I like it quite a bit. I'm going to give it a 9 on Nobody Loves You When You're Down and Out. Ya Ya, the old Lee Dorsey song, closes things out. It's a throwaway of a track. Julian plays drums. John's in good voice. At least it sounds like he's having a little bit of fun there. It's again, one of those that just doesn't add up to much. I'm going to give that a 2.5 on Ya Ya. I guess it's a cute little thing to stick on the album, but it doesn't really bring much to the album. So yeah, Walls and Bridges is I'm going to give it a 7.5. I think it's got some really good high points, and it doesn't have any real terrible low points, but I think it's hampered by a little too much padding and just sort of insignificant music in between the good points here. So not an overall solid album, but an album with some shining moments. We'll say that. So what did I say? 7 over. Maybe I said 7.5. It's early. I took the day off work, and so anyway. So that's Walls and Bridges, and that leaves, I think, 4 albums to go with John, which is we'll wrap up the solo Beatles and get on to something else. Take care, everybody. It's good to be back, and don't get COVID.